Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is questions and answers. You ask me great questions, and I do my best to respond to them. Patreon. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so on the Patreon website. When you do, you get advanced episodes on Sunday, a library of downloaded episodes for your podcast app. Everything's commercial free, of course. And you get a Patreon email where we can talk back and forth and you can ask questions. And if you're interested, there will be a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like to learn to astral project in a private atmosphere, be glad to work with you. Just send me an email, request the information, and I'll send you what you need to review. And that email will also be in the description. Okay, questions and answers. I decided to catch up on questions and answer episodes this week. I've been struggling with some insomnia, so it's been very difficult to project this week. So I decided to do question and answers. Everybody seems to enjoy them, and I certainly enjoy answering the questions. So it's good for everyone. Okay, first up, let's talk about astral projection secrets. And this was an episode where I just talked about some of the lesser known aspects of astral projection and some things that might be helpful for you to do it and to remember it. The first question was by Vosaga, who is actually a Buddhist priest. And he actually has the appellation or the actual title of venerable. So that means that he's definitely ordained and probably a little bit on the senior side. But we get lots of great people here on Astral Club. And he wanted to ask if I'd ever gone back into the past, around 2,500 years ago in ancient India, to see if I could see the Buddha when he was alive. This question kind of reminds me of one of the more popular questions I get, which is, have you ever gone back to see Jesus? It all comes down to some of the difficulties with traveling into the past. Into the future, it's great. The further you go, quite often you get to spend a lot of time there, while only a little bit of time goes by in the present. And very often you can be seen and interact with the people in these possible futures. However, in the past, it's very much the opposite. You get to spend less time in the past than passes in our present. And you're invisible. You're a ghost. You can't be seen and you can't interact with living people. So that's really the first big difficulty. When you're going back to a couple thousand years ago to try to find Jesus, or 2,500 years ago or so to see if you can find Buddha, you're faced with these realities. Let's say you hit the basic time period, and keep in mind there's lots of room for error, especially if your will flounders for even a fraction of a second. And then you find yourself, hopefully, somewhere near the time you were aiming at, and hopefully somewhere near, geographically speaking, where you wanted to be. So you regain consciousness, maybe somewhere in a body of water, maybe in a farmer's field, maybe hovering above the earth, who knows? Or if you're lucky, maybe in the area of the Middle East if you're looking for Jesus, or in India if you're looking for the Buddha. The problem is this, is you've got probably maybe 10 minutes to locate these figures who are very famous now, but weren't so famous back then. Yes, they had their local fame, but they didn't walk around with neon lights surrounding them. They generally weren't in huge palaces somewhere in a capital city where you could easily, well, not easily, but you'd have a better shot at locating them because it's hard to miss a gigantic palace in the middle of a gigantic city. But these folks wandered throughout the wilderness, both Jesus and the Buddha, going from place to place and teaching, often wearing humble robes and clothing. So it's not like they're going to stand out. It's not like they're a king who's going to have an enormous procession and they're going to be carried in a litter, glistening with gold or what have you, that perhaps if you were extra lucky, you might be able to trip across that procession. No, they often walked, both of them, very humbly on foot, sometimes by themselves, sometimes with a small group of followers. So trying to locate the Buddha or Jesus would be virtually impossible in the time that you're allotted. So no, I've never sought out Jesus or the Buddha in this particular case, because it's looking for a needle in a haystack is easy as heck compared to trying to ferret out some of these personalities from long ago with just a handful of minutes to do so. Next up, Kev Changu, who is a frequent commenter here on Astral Club, always comes up with great questions. He asks, can you ask your guide about the origin of the, quote, reincarnation trap? The quotes are mine. I think it'd benefit everyone to get a clear idea of this process, as it's very important. And so he wanted some enlightenment on this whole reincarnation situation. And he referred to it as a trap, which, it's by no means the first time I've ever seen that. And it certainly won't be the last. And obviously it refers to the idea of you've got a metaphorical or etheric or astral gun to your head, and you're constantly forced to reincarnate against your will. That's the basic belief system. My reply is as follows. Now, I have studied this topic, reincarnation, thoroughly in my guide training. Let me just tell a little story here. When I was in an elementary school, the third grade teacher was Mrs. Jones, and she was known as the hanging judge in school. If you were substandard academically and didn't learn what was required to pass her class, she was the one to fail you. You wouldn't get past her in the third grade. As a matter of fact, one kid I knew spent 3 years in the third grade until he finally could pass. I'm quite sure that he looked upon that small town classroom much like a prisoner views a maximum security cell. But would it have been better for her to do what many teachers do nowadays, and that's just pass that student along, even though he hadn't grasped the necessary lessons? Just, who cares if he can't do his times tables? Pass him on to the fourth grade. And who cares if he can't read? Pass him on to the fifth grade. That happens way too often. And I think most people who are thoughtful think that's a bad idea, that just promoting people and allowing them to leave a particular lesson, even though they haven't grasped it, you're not doing them any favors. You're actually hurting them. And they're going to continue to suffer as they continue to go through school. Now, reincarnation, of course, is a school of very real sorts. Now, passing these unprepared souls onto another plane would be the height of cruelty. Imagine finding yourself, and we've all been in places where we didn't feel welcome, where we didn't feel we belonged. Have you ever attended a party, maybe a party that was thrown by a friend of a friend or something, and you show up there and you realize that the people there, you have nothing in common with them. You feel out of place. You wish you were anywhere but at that party. Well, it's the same kind of situation. Having to work hard for your advancement can feel archaic. It can feel unfair, biased, and it's certainly not a lot of fun. But that's the way the universe works. Think about everything you've ever accomplished that truly meant something to you. Was it given to you as a participation trophy? No. It was given to you because you earned it. And that's why you're proud of it. Because you worked hard and you earned it. You also learned whatever lessons, whether they were physical or intellectual, in order to get that certificate of graduation or to get that sports trophy. Somebody giving you something without you working for it, it feels hollow. It's unearned. You feel slightly dirty about the process. Reincarnation is not a trap. It can feel like that, much like that third grade student felt trapped. But there's no way around reincarnation. The only way out is through. I've said that before, and I'm sure I'll say it again numerous times before my time here on Earth is over. I know that's not a popular sentiment, and I know that, please don't blame the messenger. I don't make the rules. All I can do is try to explain them to the best of my ability. And then we just have to learn how to work through our various problems and realize that we can't put something off, that if we've got a problem, we should solve it now. If we've got a lesson to learn, we should learn it now, because we're not going to be given a pass unless we've earned that particular pass. Trada News asks, Rick, do you as an advanced astral projector still have a hard time remembering your projections? No, I don't. My trick is I narrate my experiences as I have them. That narration allows me to fix my will in a much more effective way. It allows me to get control over the projection and to keep that control. And it also aids my memory process. Now, I've also given myself a hypnotic suggestion over the years that the minute I get out of bed and my feet hit the floor, all memories of projections will come back to me in a very clear way. So between the narration and that hypnotic suggestion, I don't have problems remembering my experiences. Radiant Bird asks, I'm a total newbie. I'm an insomniac, and I think, if I can't get to sleep, does that mean I can't project? Yeah, that's precisely what it means. It's funny because I've had the same problem this week. If you can't fall asleep, it's pretty much 99.9% impossible to project. Even worse, when you go through an insomniac episode, sometimes when it's over, you end up sleeping more and more deeply, and that becomes much more difficult, especially for new people, to have controlled projections and to also remember them. In the Astral Healing episode, Ricardo Onofre said, I wonder, how is your wife doing? And whether you attempted any astral healing on her. My wife is cancer-free, and we're very happy about that. What I did was, of course, she went through the traditional treatments, but I also asked my allies to assist her in the healing process. Over the years, I have made some friends and some allies, and that's what I call them. I call upon them and their assistance very rarely. In the past 20 years, I can't even count on one hand. I mean, it's just been a couple of times when I've actually asked for help. I only ask for help when it's absolutely important and absolutely necessary. And the healing of my wife certainly fell into that category. And it's great. She's done great, and she is now cancer-free. So thank you for asking, Ricardo. In the episode of Peter's Soul Rescue Mission, this is when I challenged Peter to help this particular woman who was earthbound in the Kensington area of Philadelphia. She died because of that awful drug called Trank, which is fentanyl and xylazine, which is an animal tranquilizer. And he did a great job helping this woman move on. Kev Changu had a lot of questions about that process. He wanted to know how do they know the soul, where to go, and what happens, and how is it controlled? And basically, the way it works is this: once you can help the soul give up their hatred or their passions, their self-loathing, and get them into a state where they can become centered and they can send a clear message for help. When that happens, that help arrives. And generally, for what we can see, the soul disappears. Because keep in mind, we're on the lower astral dealing with these souls. So when they disappear, they're going to a higher level, usually to a healing plane. And I'm certain that this particular woman, that's exactly where she went. It doesn't require a lot of overthinking. This isn't the physical. Once she sends, or anyone sends, that particular pure signal for help, it is always answered. And generally you see the soul disappear and they go to the healing plane. So that's typically the way it works. And keep in mind that we're talking about a minority of souls here who find themselves trapped in the lower astral by their own addictions and envies, anger, a wide variety of earthbound passions that are keeping them from rising up into the necessary plane where they can be healed and they can then go through their lessons and eventually move on. 01010101 ask, first of all, he said he'd like to be an astral rescue worker one day if he qualifies. And he asked, in my opinion, does everything happen for a reason? I'm not sure on the everything happens for a reason theory. Certainly there are various things that happen on the physical plane that may have been pre-planned by the soul before it incarnated. However, I do know that good things can end up being negative for the individual long term. And I have seen many times when a seemingly negative situation can eventually reveal a hidden positivity. For instance, losing a job is generally considered a negative experience. But think back into your history and how many times have you been in a situation where perhaps you lost a job, but that door closing allowed you to open another door, perhaps to a much better job or in a different area, different type of job, something that allows you more satisfaction and perhaps more money at the same time. Creative777 ask, do spirit people mostly remain disconnected from our planet's evolution, degradation during the period between lives? This was in connection with the fact that Peter's last Earth lifetime was 100 years ago. Many times, yes, they are kind of disconnected from what's going on here in the physical. They're too busy being healed on the astral. They're too busy reviewing their various life lessons, not necessarily just from the one they just came from. They may actually review other lifetimes as well. There's quite a bit of work to do, and it's usually divorced from the physical plane. Connection with the physical plane is not encouraged for folks who are on the astral, because becoming too connected to the physical plane can lead to the possibility of becoming an earthbound spirit. So, yeah, generally they are kind of disconnected from what's going on our planet. And that can lead to some difficulties when you're reincarnating too far after your last lifetime. It can cause some unexpected problems, but it's just the way things are. It's too dangerous to stay too connected to the physical plane, unless, of course, you're a guide, and then that's a whole different case. Ricardo Onofre came back again on this one and said, "Thank you, Master Rick." And I know he was kidding. I see his icons here. He knows I don't like that particular title, because just plain Rick is just fine with me. In the future Hypercane 2150 episode, AMR PROFPS, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, indicated that he'd had a projection as well where he saw a massive hypercane that was destroying everything in its path, and it was enormous. So, yeah, I mean, when you see storms like that, a lot of times there will be other projectors who will eventually come upon them as well. They have such a massive influence on our physical world that they often give forth echoes throughout time and space that disrupts things and can actually attract projectors who are looking for these types of signals. So, you know, I kind of wish he hadn't seen it as well, but there you are. However, I do want to emphasize once again that all futures that I see are possible. Some are more probable than others, but they're still possible. When there's time, there's still the possibility of change. So never lose hope. Natural Music asks, did you find out anything else about the future, maybe political-wise? No. I was so consumed with this enormous, powerful storm that was about 3/4 the size of the United States bearing down on my position, and talking to those folks who were getting ready to go into those weird flying saucer-shaped shelters, that no, I didn't really have time to talk politics. Lastly, Ever TJIK said that, okay, I'll take the bus. Jeez. I thought that was funny. That's my kind of humor, you know. He's sitting there listening to this whole thing about this future enormous storm and hypercane, and and he's like, look, okay, enough. I'll take the bus. Jeez. That's my kind of humor. Okay. I hope you enjoyed and benefited from this question and answer session. If you did, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't already. And please, questions and comments. You never know, they might make it on a future episode. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.